Welcome to the Healing Light Wellness podcast, where we delve deep into the journey of personal transformation and healing. I'm your host, Charlene Smart, and on today's episode, we're going to continue with the journey of my healing, and we're going to start by an explanation of what my best friend Kelly said. I know I kind of left that hanging last time, so that is where we'll begin today. If you have not already done so, I am going to encourage you to listen to the previous episode because today we're actually starting with a question I maybe left rattling around in your head last time. I will give you a quick synopsis. So I had handed Kelly the creative nonfiction paper I had written, which explained to her what had happened to me. And last time I left you guys thinking we don't know what her answer is. And you might be wondering that as well. So after Kelly got done reading my paper, she looked at me with kind of this dumbfounded look on her face and a look of sadness. I'm not quite sure how she pulled off both, but she did. Immediately, I thought she was going to ask me to leave. Could you just leave? However, she said she was sorry, which was not what I was expecting to come from her. Not that I would think she wouldn't be sorry, but it wasn't what I was expecting. And she never did address the fact of what I had said in the beginning, which, if you guys remember, it was, let me know if you don't want me to hang out with your kid anymore. So I had to ask her, are you okay with me being around your child? I believe she said something like, are you crazy? Are you nuts? I don't know. There was probably some profanity in there, but what it boiled down to is that what had happened to me did not and does not make me anything but Char. And truly, I think for the first time in my life, there was a person standing in front of me who knew, for one, I now was no longer afraid she was going to find out. And she still saw me as me. That was pretty big back then, and it seems pretty big right now. I had spent so much time hiding what had been done to me that I just assumed everybody would turn and run screaming. One, how absurd is that? And two, what a painful burden to carry around. And I carried this around even beyond this moment. So about 7 years ago, there was some stuff that happened in my family, and there were letters that were written to a district court. Now, it had absolutely nothing to do with me, but the story is contingent on the fact of what happened during this. And I truly thought the only people in my family that knew what had happened to me is my aunts, my grandparents, my uncle, and my mom. There is a cousin of mine who, quite honestly, I never, ever in my life would have wanted him to know what had happened to me. Beyond the fact of it made me who I was, which we all know now is not true, I didn't want him to look at me differently. I wanted him to see me as Char, who he had known his entire life. It was the one person, this is fraught with some emotion here. He was the one person in my family who loved me, and I was pure. I was pure. I wasn't stained. I wasn't what had happened to me. He just loved me for me. Moving forward, I just went through life assuming, because I hadn't told him, so why would this even be a thing? Moving forward to 7 years ago. In one of these letters, as I'm reading this letter that had been submitted to the court, it had listed out that my father had molested me. And even though it had absolutely nothing to do with me, that crushed me. It crushed me to the point I was on the floor, crying in a heap of sadness, embarrassment. See, up to that point, I had not really started on my healing journey. It crushed me. One, to know the one person who loved me and didn't know what had happened to me actually did. Then what was he thinking? What did he think about me? And there was another element that I didn't realize was here, but it was. And that was the fact that I was back in the court system. I hadn't been in the court system since I was like 5 or 6. And here I was back in the court system, which my guess is you're like, Char, you are nuts. What's the problem with that? And truly, as an adult, I'm asking the same question. But it wasn't the adult in me that had that feeling. It was the little girl in me. That's who came up in that moment. So in that moment, after I picked myself up and several days later, I realized that I can't keep living like this. The fact that people knew my story, it was my story. It was my story. But people knew it who I never wanted them to know. But it was out there. And I could choose to live under the pain and the anguish, and not just of what was happening right now, but when I read these words, man, I was transported back to that little girl, back to the lady, the girl, the teenager who her entire life, she prayed people couldn't guess about what she was carrying around. It was all of that. I could have stayed there, but I chose not to. I had shortly before been introduced to emotional freedom technique, and like it or love it, it is my go-to. It is actually how I healed myself. Now, I didn't do it alone. There were others, but I did the majority of my healing alone. And this moment, which seemed like the end of the world, was actually the beginning of my world. Because it was in that moment that I made the decision, I do not want to be what was done to me. I was more than that Char. And I was ready to stop carrying all of this burden with me. Now, you probably have heard me say this before, but I believe the things that have happened to us in our past are shadows. It is as if we're standing underneath the shadow of what happened to me, or I was standing underneath of the shadow. And I chose to take one teeny tiny toe and put it out of the shadow. And I realized, as hard as this was going to be, I had a choice. I could choose to remain where I'd been my entire life, or I could choose to step away from the shadows and find out what my life could be without them. And my friend, that is exactly what I did. And it's exactly what you can do. Now, whether or not you carry the same trauma or events that I've had in my life, you know you're carrying things from the past. And even if you don't clearly see it, it might be a good idea to simply ask yourself, when you're struggling in the here and now with maybe trying to make a decision or why you feel the way you feel, it might be a good idea to start asking why. Where did that come in? When did I start feeling that way? For me, it was easy. I knew where this was all coming from. I didn't have to ask myself. I've known my entire life. But asking yourself these hard questions and making the decision to take a teeny tiny toe and put it outside of your shadows will free you. It will absolutely free you. So, all these years later, I find myself in a completely different space than I was 7 years ago. And I've been here for a bit. Now, I am so thankful for that moment, which seems kind of crazy maybe, but that moment is the catalyst that brought me to be able to stand here or sit here in front of you and share my story. My hope is that my story will inspire you to consider the fact that you don't need to stand under the shadows of your past, that you have the opportunity to choose a different way of living. And if you decide that you are ready, whether today or 40 years from now, you decide that you are ready to take your life back, I'm here. And I would love for you to reach out to me. It brings me so much joy to sit with clients at the beginning of their healing journey. And sometimes it's not even the beginning. Sometimes it's been years and years. But at any point they come into my life and I'm able to sit with them, I get the honor of watching them grow and change and flourish into the person they were meant to be beyond the things and the shadows that have happened to them in their past. I want you to feel this freedom, but it is always your choice. However, if you are in the market for somebody to help you, I hope you reach out to me. And if not, I know that you will find the right person at the right time. And I hope when you find yourself on the other side, you let me know and you tell me your success story and how your life has changed. Because, my dear, my life has changed in ways I could not even have imagined. And I cannot wait for you to experience the same thing. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Next episode, we'll continue down this healing path. And if you ever have questions or concerns, please feel free to reach out to me. Or if there's something you want to know, obviously, I am becoming an open book. If you know somebody who my story may help, I encourage you to share these episodes or videos with them. And my dear, until we meet again, may your days be filled with love and light.